Welcome to the Sultans of Spine podcast. I'm your host, Jamil Pendleton. Today on the show, we're lucky to have Dr. Richard Chua in Tucson, Arizona. Dr. Chua needs no introduction because you've probably seen his LinkedIn or some of his videos that he does on his YouTube channel. But Dr. Chua went to Wabash College, which is the last all-male liberal arts college in the country, which you told me off mic. And that's incredible because I actually went to an all-male Jesuit Catholic high school in Dallas, Jesuit College Prep, which I think you and your wife did the same, right? Is that?
Yeah, my wife and I went to a Jesuit college preparatory high school back in Indiana.
Amazing.
Service to others.
Yeah, it's men for others, right? Service, yeah, amazing. And it's coming full circle now. So then after that, after Wabash, you went to Purdue for a degree in, is it chemistry or biology?
Biology, yeah.
Biology, thank you. And then Indiana University for medical residency and all that good stuff. Wonderful.
Right.
And then you're a private practice neurosurgeon, began that in Indiana for 7 years, and then now over 16 in the Tucson area for a small group, single specialty, as well as an academic appointment at University of Arizona, Tucson, which is part of the Banner Health system. And so that kind of has you teaching and kind of engaged with the next generation of surgeons. And so, look, thank you so much for being on. This is such a gift for me to be able to connect with you in this medium. We've met multiple times before in different ways and different engagements. But for me, this is where, really on camera, we're going to get to know one another a little bit more and share your story with others that, maybe don't know all the great things that you do, Dr. Chua. So thank you for being on the Sultans of Spine.
Yeah, thanks, Jay, for having me. And I love what you've done. And I think this past year during the COVID pandemic has really taught us that there are a lot of different ways we can connect with each other, colleagues, patients, old friends, new friends. And so delighted to be a part of it and really have enjoyed seeing this product of yours flourish.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It means a lot. I mean, you do a great job of, I would say, marketing and sharing some of the great things that you're doing in the operating room, sharing those outside those walls. Because I think people that work with you know just how special and gifted you are and what you do for your patient community. But then the young surgeons that you train, we were last together in Miami for the Future Spine Leaders Course, which was just exceptional. And you did such a good job of sharing your story with them. And how lucky. And it's just fun for me sitting at the tables with these. I mean, at that point where I'm older now than the young surgeons coming through. I'm just barely older than them. So we've kind of crossed in the night. And I'm like, okay, now I'm seeing them taking notes feverishly, recording you guys, listening to everything they can, being a sponge, which is the same exact way that I learned when I was starting out in med tech. So what are your thoughts on medical education? You do such a good job with it. Is that always something that you wanted to do? Let's talk about that.
It's interesting. It wasn't something I planned on doing, but as you've said, as you mature in your career, it becomes an incredible honor and a privilege to not only do what we do, take care of patients, but actually teach the new generation. And without knowing it, I really learned a lot from my dad. My dad is a retired interventional radiologist, but he also was a residency director for radiology for about 20 years. And to me, that was just part of his job. And I never realized until well into my career how much I get out of that teaching experience. So yes, not only do I learn from the students, just as in the Future Spine Leaders, I learn about some of the new things that the residents and fellows are being taught. But there's a lot to be said about not only giving back in many different ways, but also learning. And I love your description of the sponge.
Yes.
And it's clear that most people in this industry and healthcare and surgeons specifically want to continue to learn. And it's amazing to be a part of that. And not only do I get to teach medical students and residents and fellows at the university, I have tons of high school kids and college kids that spend time with me in shadow, and then all the way up to teaching mid-career and late career surgeons through industry partnerships like yourself and Medtronic. It's just a fabulous way to keep your brain young, as my dad used to tell me.
You know, what's interesting, thank you so much for sharing that. It's awesome it comes from your dad. You know, my dad's a big force in my life too. And, you know, as we're filming this, he's doing better every day. He's going to be discharged from the hospital this week. And so
glad to hear that.
There. Thank you. Thank you for your support and prayers. But one thing you mentioned that made me think about the process of teaching. And we've all had, whether it's through family members or whether it's through maybe teachers that, you know, in grade school or high school, we've all had those people in our lives that have pointed us in a certain direction, whether it's through encouragement or maybe challenging us to be better versions of ourselves. When I say that, aside from your father, is there someone or maybe a couple different people that you can look back to, whether it be during your residency or whenever it was, that you just, yeah, that's this person, and if you want to give him a shout out, you know?
Yeah, no question. The first, second, and third person that comes to mind besides my father is my former chairman of neurosurgery at Indiana University, Dr. Robert Campbell. Dr. Campbell took a chance on me. I was not the stereotypical smart textbook typical neurosurgeon. I actually didn't get into medical school first time around, second time around, got into med school the third time around.
Wow.
Finished medical school, not at the top of my class, probably somewhere in the middle of my class. And I became interested in neurosurgery, wanted to become a neurosurgeon, and knew I had about a 1 in 1,000 chance or less. And worked my butt off during my sub-internship at Indiana University, tried to work well with the other medical students and residents, impressed upon Dr. Campbell, I believe, and he took me out of the match, something that I will, one person is responsible for me becoming a neurosurgeon, and he took a chance on me. He didn't have to, and you may or may not know this, but we only train and finish about 120 to 140 neurosurgeons per year in the country. So that means only about 120 to 140 people per year get to start their neurosurgery training. And so eternally grateful to my wonderful chairman, Dr. Bob Campbell.
He's your Sultan of neurosurgery, right?
He's my Sultan of neurosurgery.
You know, that is so special that you shared that. I mean, the fact that, you know, on the third try, and that just speaks to your grit and your, you just knew this was your calling, and you weren't going to let anything stop you or dissuade you from pursuing your dreams. And so that's something that I certainly latch on to, that I think a lot of people that end up watching this will resonate with. I mean, not all of us are surgeons. Few of us, very few of you all get to be a neurosurgeon, right? As you said, or an orthopedic spine surgeon, but that's, I think, transferable and relatable, I should say, to anyone. You follow a dream.
In fact, I used it all the time for my now grown daughters when they were trying out for the volleyball team or the basketball team or marching band or choir or whatever. I remind them frequently, probably more times than they would like to admit, about how failure can make you stronger, and it makes you a better person, basketball player, volleyball player at the end of that process.
Absolutely. And I think you know me well enough to know that that's a theme of my, you know, resurgence recently, but my whole career. I mean, you know, I graduated college without a job, had to move back in with my parents. Embarrassing, just depressing. You know, here we are in Mental Health Awareness Month. And, you know, that was a depressing time for me. I did seek counseling for that. And it was tough to go basically kind of show up on the door and like, hey, mom and dad, all this investment and hope in me and sweat equity and sacrifice did not amount to much of anything. Now, part of that was the dot-com crash in 2002 when I graduated college. I'm fully aware of that. But I draw from that every day. I draw from the fact that I didn't finish the job, and I needed, and I think I still, to this day, Dr. Chua, I still try to make my parents proud. And I think that I'm getting there. I'm making small improvements, but ultimately it's all about how you respond to adversity and to setbacks. So
yeah,
I'm so
absolutely.
glad you shared that.
Yeah, and I think, and setbacks in our field of neurosurgery can be a lot of different things. And setbacks, the most common setbacks we think about are, bad clinical outcomes or poor clinical outcomes. And yeah, it's a good reminder every day that not everything is rosy.
It's not. And so, okay, this is a perfect segue. I mean, this is working great. It is about outcomes, your business, your measurement, or your, I guess, how you are viewed either in the community that you work in and support or from your peers is about your outcomes. And it's kind of difficult. It's still being, those outcomes are, I guess, the form of measurement are evolving, as well as the technology by which you treat your patients. Can we talk about that in your practice, in your hands, and kind of where you see that going?
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think everyone has a different definition of success and failures, and a lot of that is just personality driven. And we quote a lot of literature to our patients and our colleagues and to ourselves. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, I feel like I have to sleep well at night with what I've accomplished with a patient or what I haven't accomplished. And while a patient may not have a horrible disabling complication, it pains me when a patient doesn't do as well as I expected them to do or wanted them to do. And part of that is just how I was brought up, to have a lot of empathy and compassion for each other, including my patients. And so I've learned from that too. And I think that's ultimately made me a better surgeon, a better advocate for my patients. And with that, I try as best I can, even in sort of the latter part of my career, to find tools and tips and tricks to make me better at having better success or less failures, however we define that.
Nice. And I've seen that, in different ways, but just in how your adoption of, call it MIS, minimally invasive surgery techniques, right? Navigation robotics, right? In your workflows, and I think most people get that, but what does workflow mean to you, and kind of how have you adopted new technology in your practice?
Yeah, it's interesting. So it's probably changed over the time that I've been in practice, but I think what I've tried to do when adopting new technology and techniques is number one, I really don't want to change my workflow too much. As surgeons, old dogs are hard to teach new tricks. And I think that's probably pretty accurate even for someone like myself. And so when I critically look at a new technique or technology, the first thing I want to ask myself is it as good or better than what I'm currently doing? And that doesn't mean what does the literature say or what does Dr. Smith say on the East Coast or Dr. Jones say on the West Coast. I need to believe it for myself. And I've got this guttural feeling that I've got to believe it is as good, if not better. And then I need to prove it to myself. So again, doesn't matter what the literature says. If I can't make it work in my hands and my patient population in my practice, then it's not going to work. And so I think over the years, I've kind of learned how to critically look at a new technique and technology, study it, talk to other people, try it, prove it to myself, and then be open and honest with my experience and on my observations in addition to the results. And then the final thing I think is over the years, I've had to learn how to understand how that is in the context of the greater picture of the practice of medicine, the cost of medicine, and where that is for the future. So some of these things, as you know, we don't really know if they are better. They might be better, but at a huge increased cost. And I think that's something we also have to kind of learn how to balance.
Yeah, and it's an ongoing debate. I mean, you know, what is better, to your point? I mean, how do we measure these outcomes when the goalposts keep moving, when the variables are, I mean, they're not fixed. Techniques differ, technology's changing at a rapid pace. I think that we still have yet to see truly the impact of, let's say machine learning and robotics and data, in the operating room.
Right. And then, of course, we throw in this pandemic, which has now been a year and a half, and it's going to probably last longer before we come completely out of it. And so I've sort of taken the benefit of years of experience to try to use these things that come up and try to figure out how to make it work. As an example, this pandemic and robotics naturally came together for me about 2 to 3 years ago. And I was starting to see a trend of my patients with robotic lumbar fusions. And because of the better accuracy, because of an MIS technique, I was seeing patients that I thought I could really highly select to do outpatient lumbar fusions. And of course, when the pandemic hit, at least in Arizona, March and April of 2000, we were shut down for 6 weeks. We couldn't do any surgery except for emergency surgery. Well, I had a lot of patients sort of teetering on that incapacitating pain syndrome. They're not paralyzed, can't declare it an emergency. So I found myself trying to push the envelope and find patients that I could do robotic-assisted lumbar fusions and send them home. So they didn't take up a bed for a COVID patient. We had our third surge in Arizona in December 2020, January 2021. Same thing. We were shut out from doing elective surgery where patients even needed to stay in the hospital for one night. So I found a way to use that to my advantage. And now since January, over half of my lumbar fusions for degenerative indications are outpatient surgeries. And that's completely changed the tune for those patients. And now, my 70 and sometimes 80-year-old patients are wanting to have outpatient lumbar fusion, which inconceivable even 5 years ago in my practice.
That is incredible. I love how you framed that, because you're saying the pandemic, and I agree with you, Dr. Chua, the pandemic, in my opinion, sped up trends that were already happening.
Yeah,
so the shift to the ambulatory surgery center market, or AASC, as we call it, the shift was already there, right? So it's a quality, it's a controlled environment, efficiency. That's probably the biggest one. Yet the robotics space, or other big large capital, don't always play there for a multitude of reasons: capex expenditure, actual physical real estate in the OR, right? Like how much space they take up, and then I think also the fact that they are on the front end, they take up a little bit longer time until that learning curve gets dialed and that workflow gets to the point where the economies of scale kick in. And so then if you're a CFO, or if you're running an ASC and you're saying, hey, wait a minute, I need that room to do 9 knees. Why are you doing 1 or 2? That's a real concern. And it's going to be a market dynamic that industry, we're going to have to deal with as we transition into the ASC space. And so, but I love what you said. I mean, you were able to learn and treat a whole new patient population outpatient. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's true. And I think the other thing, going back to your original question about adopting new technology, is I think we all have to find a way to be flexible. In medicine and in surgery, we can tend to be a bit inflexible. And I think what I learned over the pandemic is we have to find some additional flexibility for our patients foremost, but for ourselves and our families. And so, I don't know, it's just, as I've gotten more gray or less hair, it's quite intellectually challenging to kind of find those ways to do a better job at what we do.
I love that. What would be advice we kind of talked a little bit about through your path. And I think people that are listening were likely taking notes. I was taking mental notes. But what would be your advice to give someone wanting to pursue a career in neurosurgery or spine?
Yeah, the first is, and it's really a cliche, but it's absolutely true. You got to do it because you love it and you want to do it for the right reasons. There are a lot of negative things that can happen in medicine and in surgery and in spine surgery. And, if you read some of the Becker's types of journals and things like that, there is a lot of unprofessional behavior and some unethical behavior. And so it's an industry and a career that I think if you don't have the right path or the right light that's guiding you, you can stray. And so you got to go into it for the right reason. I know I had no better example than my dad, and I had no other career in mind other than medicine. So it was easy for me. I also think for the young people out there, boy, is it a financial hit to go into medicine. I was just talking with our graduating chief resident 2 weeks ago over his dinner, and the guy is $320,000 in debt.
Wow.
And he's going to be at the top of the food chain from an income standpoint as a physician and a surgeon. But I think about all of my friends and colleagues who are not neurosurgeons and spine surgeons or orthopedic surgeons or cardiothoracic surgeons. So there's a huge financial commitment when you're thinking about going into medicine or surgery. And some of the things I hope I can kind of pass on to the newer generation as well.
That's really well said. It's a front end investment, but also to your point, it's a long, 7 years?
It's a long haul, yeah.
And then finally, again, to your initial point, you gotta love it to carry you through that and to know that investment, there will be a return, if you do things the right way. We talked about this a little bit, or go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that the other thing about doing it the right way and for the right reason is, one of the things I did not anticipate, although I went into medicine to help people, et cetera, one of the things I did not anticipate was the amazing gratification I get from my patients. I, many years ago, started a hobby, and I started to get my patients to sign pictures for me. And so now my exam rooms and my office are not adorned with my diplomas and certificates, but the walls are just hanging of patients who have signed little notes to me and pictures. And I think if we can value the experience and the reward we get from our patients and that gratification, that certainly, I think, offsets all the financial demands that it can be.
That's fascinating, Dr. Chua. I mean, you're beginning with the end in mind, which is another core thing that I try to focus on too. You're beginning with, okay, I'm going to set out on this career, embark on this journey. It's going to be difficult at first. It's going to cost a lot of equity and time and money. It's an investment. But the payoff, and I don't mean that monetarily, just the reward, to your point, is the fulfillment you get of changing people's lives. And I know from my experience, standing in that operating room for 10 plus years with surgeons like you, just being a part of that team and just getting kind of the secondhand whiff of those success stories is unbelievable. And it's what keeps us going through an industry, at least me. My story kept me going through tough times, challenging months, difficulties, and that's why we do what we do. So thank you.
Yeah. If I can, I want to tell you a quick story about a recent experience that kind of ties in a couple of the questions you've asked. And that's, I did an operation on a patient of mine about 2 months ago. He's been a patient of mine for 15 years. I've taken care of both he and his wife, multiple operations on both of them. And this patient needed a 3-level anterior cervical fusion for really bad spinal stenosis. And I've probably done close to 2,000 of these by now in my residency and career. and I had an intraoperative injury to the vertebral artery about halfway through this surgery. It's a known complication. We're trained how to avoid it. We're trained how to take care of it. Had never happened to me. Not sure it's happened to any of my partners, but it happened to me. And long story short, he somehow I got away. He got away without a major complication like stroke. Right. I had to bail out on the original surgery,
sure,
because I needed to save his life. Mm-hmm. And honest to God, the next morning after surgery, he looked at me, had a smile on his face, and said, "You had a rough day yesterday."
Oh my goodness!
And he said, "Are you okay?" And
wow,
I almost lost it.
Right.
His wife, I had been on the phone with his wife multiple times during that day. And she also asked if I was okay. She could tell how bothered I was by it, how worried I was for him and his wife. And then fast forward about 3 weeks later, we had to reschedule him for the surgery to finish the original surgery, to bring him back, and walked into the preoperative holding area. And he reached his hand out, he shook my hand, and he said, "Dr. Chua, I just want you to know my wife and I have 110% confidence in you today, just like we did 3 weeks ago." And I was speechless. I mean,
I'm getting the chills.
Yeah, that. I was speechless. And I think we take a lot for granted in the business that we're in. And it was just another 3-level anterocervical fusion. But we take a lot for granted about this relationship we have with our patients. And, the fact that he was able to say that to comfort me, to prepare me, was just incredible.
Wow.
Incredible.
Thank you so much for sharing. And if I may, how did that second surgery go? How did you feel exposing? I mean, what?
Yeah. So a little bit of trepidation. Tried to go through my same routine. Obviously was a little bit even more careful and more deliberate about every move.